My name is Jim Ohmart, and this was the house that my wife and I bought in 1986, long time ago. We found this house for sale. It was empty, it had been empty for about 3 years, and we were looking for a new place to live. We had goats at the time, and we lived right over near the heights, and people had complained about our goats. So we found this place with a huge vacant lot behind it, with a big old barn in it. So we moved over here with our goats, and as soon as we moved over here, we realized there were several empty houses around here too. And I was kind of between jobs and found one for sale very, very cheap and bought it, and we started fixing it up. My wife helped me on weekends out between her work, and we rented it out. That was our first rental property. The house we'd been living in, we rented to a person who had been living with us. So we had 2 rental properties, and I became a property manager. At that time, Houston's economy was going kind of bad, and several people had called and said, "I hear you're managing property. Could you handle our rental property too?" So over the next couple of years, I started managing rental property. So I went ahead and as empty vacant property around here came up for sale, one at a time, we would buy the houses and fix them up, usually one a year. And during that period of time, I ended up buying up quite a few houses in this neighborhood, fixing them up, usually one at a time, once a year. And we ended up with our own little community. It's called Japhet Community, and we learned a lot about it as we were fixing it up. Japhet Community was originally founded by Isidore and Ida Jaffet, a couple from Germany who immigrated here in the late 1800s. He opened an he opened a business down on Main Street, down on the edge of Buffalo Bayou there, I believe on Commerce Street. And he imported wine and cigars. We found an old ad in an old magazine in the library. He imported fine Cuban cigars, he imported European wine, and he sold Schlitz beer. My kind of man. Anyway, he bought 26 acres here and subdivided it into lots. And there were a couple of houses built on it, and his was the first house built in 1894. It's the house you see behind you. When we bought it, it had only had 3 or 4 owners, so it was pretty much in the condition as it had been in when it was built. We learned a lot from the work we did on it and some of the papers we found in it. The house originally was basically a cube. Each room was 15 by 15. It was 4 rooms. Each room was about 15 by 15 with 12-foot ceilings. And later, after about 1913, they added on 2 rooms on the outside. One was a big kitchen, and the other one was a sleeping porch that went around the south side to catch the sun on cold winter days. And they had also an indoor bathroom at that time. So in 1919, the city of Houston built their first major modern sewage treatment plant. It was built just to the southeast of us, and unfortunately that's where the wind comes from in the area. And after a few years, the smell became so bad in this neighborhood that nobody built any new houses here. One by one, a few people stayed, and occasionally a house would be built. I asked a lady who lived here, who had been living here since the late 40s, how come the few people that lived here stayed here or bought houses here or built houses here. And she said, well, there were really only a few kinds of people that would stay here. People that were too poor to move, people who had no sense of smell, or plumbers, because they considered that smell the smell of money. She said a lot of the people that worked at the sewage treatment plant would live here because it was a cheap place to live and they didn't bother the smell. It was what they smelled all day. So anyway, The sewage treatment plant had shut down about 3 years before we moved here, so we never knew about it, and we really never knew about the smell. And there were a lot of empty houses here and a lot of people willing to sell, and at that time the prices were very, very low and we could afford to buy them. And with my wife having a job, I was able to work on the houses and remodel them, and we tried to build a community with affordable houses, with people that, like-minded people that were interested in gardening and sustainability. And so that's what we're doing here, and we hope to continue doing it as long as we're able. Hi, I'm Jim Ohmart, and behind me is Japhet Creek, which is much older than I am. Japhet Creek was here when we moved here in 1986. We didn't even know really what it was. In fact, at that time I found it on a map listed as Japhet Gully. But it was probably 5 years before I really went down and explored it. We had so much to do in fixing up our house, getting it livable, and then we bought a house, fixed it up and rented it, getting it rentable. We really didn't have time to explore the neighborhood a whole lot, but one day I was down looking at the creek and seeing all the trash in it, and saw a trash bag come flying down from the other side of the creek, and I looked up and there was a young boy about 10, and I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Grandma told me to throw the trash down here." And I said, "Don't you have a garbage can?" And he said, "Yeah, but it's full." And I said, "Well, I've got one over here. Why don't you come over here next time?" And he just ran away. Anyway, come to find out, everybody had been using the creek for a garbage can for years, and we were kind of concerned about that. I went to a class, I think maybe Urban Harvest was sponsoring it, on building community, and I met a young man there named Brian Harrod, and we were talking at one of the breaks. They had shown somebody who had taken on a project of rehabilitating wetlands, and Brian said, "Oh, gosh, I wish I had a project like that. I'd really like to find something like that to do." I said, "Brian, have you ever heard of Japhet Creek?" And he said, "No, where's that?" And I knew I had him. Anyway, Brian took over the project. He got together groups of people. This was back in 2009, I think. He got together groups of people that came as volunteers. We usually have 3 groups in the spring, 3 or 4 groups in the spring, and 3 or 4 groups in the fall that would come down and just haul trash out. I remember one day we had a volunteer who brought one of the company nearby had a tractor, and they brought a tractor down, and we loaded over 300 tires one weekend that we pulled out of the creek. It was just amazing, all the trash we pulled out of the creek. Scrap metal. One time we loaded scrap metal, and we got, I think, $200 worth of scrap metal. It was loaded on and hauled to a scrap metal yard. Got $200. We had a big hamburger barbecue with that money. But anyway, so the creek has been cleaned up by volunteers over the years. We built a hike and bike trail, just a little nature trail. It wasn't a hike and bike trail, but a little nature trail back into the creek. It's still there. We invite anybody that's watching that wants to come take a walk. But the best thing that happened, Brian, with the help of Buffalo Bayou Partnership and Trust for Public Land, found a federal grant and bought and did land swaps to buy Japhet Creek property, the banks of Japhet Creek and most of it, and convert it to a city park eventually, so that it will remain a city park and in its natural state forever. They still have a few pieces they're trying to get, but we as a community maintain the park with our volunteers, and we're so proud of it. It's down for anybody that's watching and wants to know, it's down in the 4600 block of Clinton Drive, and we just recently got I believe it's a $30 million grant to develop Japhet Creek and 2 other sections. I think we get $10 million of it to develop just the planning for the development of Japhet Creek into really nice hike and bike trail and moving out invasive plants, replanting it with natural plants, and make it a beautiful environmental wonderland. Hi, I'm Ohmart, and I'm sitting in front of our community fire pit here in Japhet Community. We have a tradition that goes back into the last century. I think starting in late 1999, we decided to have a bonfire one cold night, and it was the night of a full moon. And ever since then, whenever it's cold enough, we have a bonfire, and whenever it's a full moon. We've also sometimes do it on January 1st too. But this is our little bonfire pit. We moved it over to this side of the creek last year, and this is our little neighborhood behind us, one of the streets in our neighborhood. Japhet Creek's on the other side here, and this is what we do here, part of our community activities. Right over here, the little yellow building is our community center. We have get-togethers here, potluck dinners. Haven't been doing much of that because of COVID, but and same thing with the bonfires. But when things get back to normal, probably next October we'll have our first bonfire. Hopefully this summer we'll start with potlucks again. But that's what goes on here in our little community.